Hello, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be reading 3 Jane Austen novels and letting you know which one has the most viable love interest, which one is going to be my book boyfriend. Now, I'm not going to be reading Pride and Prejudice, like I'm sure a lot of people are going to assume. I'm going to be reading the 3 Jane Austen novels that I do own, Sense and Sensibility, Persuasion, and Emma. Very excited to read these 3 novels and see like which one has the love interest of my dreams and of my heart. I've never read Jane Austen before, which I feel like is a little blasphemous to say as a romance reader, but I'm righting those wrongs today and I am going to do them with you. Tell you all my thoughts and feelings on Jane Austen and on her love interest. But before we get into it, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the sponsor of today's video, Book of the Month. Book of the Month is a super popular and fast-growing online book service for readers. Their mission is to promote new and emerging authors and help readers find books that they love. Their team vets hundreds of books each month and gives readers their choice of a curated selection of new and early release titles so you can spend more time reading and less time researching. Book of the Month is risk-free. You can skip any month, any time, and you will not be charged. Plus, they have the best price for new release hardcover fiction. You can get your first book for just $5 with code WONDER. This month, I picked a romance title and a thriller title. Are we surprised? That's what I kind of always go for. But I'm really excited for Kiss Her Once for me because this is a sapphic romance with a marriage of convenience plotline where our heroine is having to like fight her feelings for this woman that she met a year ago, even though she's like fake married to, I believe, this woman's brother, so that should be interesting. And then I selected All the Dangerous Things, which I believe is a thriller about a woman whose child goes missing and she cannot sleep until he comes back to her. And I mean that very literally. She cannot sleep until her son is returned to her, and I believe that leads to some interesting, like, unreliable narrator situations, which I'm very excited for. Again, if you would like to try Book of the Month for yourself, this is the perfect month to do so because new members are going to get their first book for just $5 if you use code WONDER. Thanks again to Book of the Month for sponsoring this portion of today's video. So I have finally started my first Jane Austen book. I can't believe it's taken me nearly 28 years to start a Jane Austen novel, but I decided to pick up Persuasion first. I feel like this is probably not the book to start with from her, but it is the shortest one, and I feel like with the way that this bitch uses run-on sentences, I'm certainly going to need her shortest book first. This one I believe is her most like melancholy work, and I believe it's her last finished novel before she passed away. I don't know how to feel about it, okay? So I've started it. I feel like I kind of get the gist of the story. I haven't really been exposed to the hero of the story, which obviously is the most important part given the theme of this video, which is who is the best Jane Austen book boyfriend? You know, it's gonna be a series kind of, because I can't read all of her books in one video. I just simply can't. This story is about our main character, Anne. Her family sort of fucking sucks. That's what I'm getting right off the bat, right? Dad is really bad with money, and he's been squandering the family money, right? And all he really cares about is his eldest daughter and making sure that she marries wealthy, I guess, because she's beautiful even though she's 30, and he's really handsome like the dad is, and so he's like, my beautiful daughter like deserves the best, right? He's kind of looking out for her. He doesn't really think very highly of his daughter Mary, who has married wealthy as well. She's done well for herself, right? And then Anne, I believe, is the middle child, and she's kind of forgotten. No one really cares about her or her opinions. She's just kind of vibing, right? Like, she wants to help her family despite the fact that they don't give a fuck about her, and she also is friends with her mom, her deceased mother's best friend. So I think her name is Lady Russell, and she's like the companion to Anne. I do kind of know what the story is. I feel like I generally know the synopsis of all of these books, but I believe in this one, Anne is going to reunite, I guess, with an old lover, an old flame, proposed to her a while ago, and she ended up turning him down because her family was like, he ain't rich enough. I haven't met him yet, and I don't really know him or anything. I think my first observations are that, damn, this book is long. Also, it's sort of giving me ACOTAR vibes, which who did it first, right? Miss Sarah J. Maas or Jane Austen? I feel like Anne is giving Farrah energy. I mean, Farrah is a little bit more aggressive, but she seems to really care about her family despite the fact that her family doesn't really give a shit about her. So I find that interesting. I guess I'm curious to see what kind of hero is going to stand up to her kind of like blandness. And I'm curious like if she is going to have more of a personality than we've been led to believe up until this point. Not that we've really like gotten different POVs. I mean, that's not really how the story is written, but I don't think I know enough about her or her desires to really like get a good feeling for who she is. I don't know. I'm tentatively interested in this one for sure. And I guess, like I said, I'm just kind of like, I wouldn't say I'm surprised at the writing, but I am surprised at the writing. Like, is it a little bit inaccessible? Absolutely. I mean, it's ye olden days writing, right? But I guess I'm really just surprised that a single sentence is an entire paragraph. I thought I wrote run-on sentences, but this bitch, she got me beat. I think I'm gonna get to the 50% mark of this book tonight, God willing, and I'll update you tomorrow on my thoughts and feelings. You know, hopefully they're good ones, because we're in this shit for the long haul, you know? Also, I forgot to add that Anne's daddy is so bad with money that they're having to like Airbnb out the family estate and move to Bath. And Anne's kind of like, I barely have any friends and I don't think Bath is really for me, but like I'm gonna go because like, you know, it's for my family or whatever. He doesn't like want to advertise the fact that he's renting out his house. He's like asking, is it the family solicitor? I'm gonna call him that. I don't actually know what Mr. Shepard's like actual job is, but his job is basically to like rent out the house. Mr. Shepard's like, yeah, like I'm gonna try really hard to make sure this information doesn't get out so you don't look like a poor broke chump. It might be kind of hard given your like importance and position or whatever, which is funny. I think he's just trying to like kind of stroke his ego, but like he's a dumbass, you know what I mean? Anyway, okay, sorry, I'm back. I just like really, okay, Sir Walter needs to the fuck off. Like, he's talking with Mr. Shepard about like who could potentially let the house. Elizabeth's like co-friend who has like 2 babies kind of out of wedlock, or like she's divorced or whatever, I don't know. She's like a woman of ill repute, shall we say. She's saying like, oh, I think it'd be a good idea to let a sailor live in your house because like they're gonna keep it in tip-top shape because that's what they have to do in their profession. And Sir Walter's like, first of all, I don't really want them like going in my gardens and like doing certain things in my house in the lease agreement. Like we gotta make sure that whoever lives here is gonna like do what I say and like not get too big for their britches. Second of all, yeah, sure, the Navy is great and all, like, okay, sure, but I feel like it gives undue distinction to these people. It basically, he doesn't like the Navy because it lets people rise to positions of power. Instead, you should be a nepo baby, is what Sir Walter's saying. I don't like this man. I mean, you're not supposed to, but like, what a idiot. We have found a tenant for Sir Walter's house. Thank the Lord. It is going to be in Admiral and his wife, which is perfect for our man Walter because this guy is going to sound very esteemed living in his house, but he is not going to be more important than Sir Walter, you know, because that would be bad, right? You like want someone nice enough to be living in your house to where people are like, oh, okay, cool, but not so much better than you, like not better than you at all. In fact, this man is quite the character too. He was like insistent that whoever lived in his house not have a tan. A little suspicious, Sir Walter. But I've learned a little bit more about Anne as the story has gone on. I'm like 20% into Persuasion, and hopefully we can move a little bit quicker for these next clips. Wow, I was like really slow in my speech in those first clips. My apologies. She's now medicated and she is ready to roll. So we've learned a little bit about Anne and her past. Kind of like I was saying earlier on, I do kind of understand what this book is about, and we learn that Anne was in a sort of like small engagement, I guess you could say, or like a relationship with this guy named Wentworth. And she was going to marry him except for her father and her mom's best friend, Mrs. Russell. Like, yeah, we don't really think this guy is the best choice for you because a little bit overconfident, and he also doesn't have the best job right now. But this guy was like, no, I'm going to have a great job. I'm going to be wealthy. Like, you can trust me. No one really trusted him except for Anne. And unfortunately, that wasn't enough. And this all happened when she was 19. She was very impressionable. So she listened to her father and Mrs. Russell. And then a couple of years later, she definitely regrets her decision. And she says, basically in her internal thoughts, that if this situation ever happened to someone around her, she would try to insist that they listen to their own heart and like not listen to the people around them. She definitely has some regrets there. Now the house is being let out and she is going to go and live with her younger sister, Mary. And we get to know Mary and Mary's household. I think she has like 2 or 3 young boys. She has a husband who is probably a little bit more, I don't want to say sane, but a little bit more responsible than she is. I mean, he's a man back in the day, so like how responsible can he be? But he is definitely a little bit more level-headed than Mary. Mary is very much an attention seeker. She's definitely had a really easy time growing up because, I don't know, she like lived in this household where you could kind of get away with doing anything, and she doesn't really like taking care of her kids. She doesn't really like not getting to party and have fun. She's just kind of a bad time. And whenever we find out that the people staying in, I guess, the old house, Walter's house, Kellynch Hall or whatever, that's being let out, whenever we find out that the Admiral's wife's brother is going to come into town, we realize that that is, oh my god, Wentworth. We're not actually sure which Wentworth. There's 2 of them, but we find out quickly that it is the one that was engaged to Miss Jane. Were they engaged or was it just like a relationship? I'm not really sure, but he comes to town, has a lot of feelings about this. She's like not sure if it's going to be awkward. She's not sure if she wants to see this guy. And when the opportunity arises for her to meet him, she kind of gets out of it. I can't really recall if in the text she pointedly doesn't want to go, but she's a little bit mopey about it. So the situation arises and Mary really wants to go with her husband to meet Wentworth and meet with the Crofts, I guess, is the name of the people living in Kellynch Hall. But she hits her husband up and she's like, hey, I know our son kind of broke his clavicle or whatever, like I know he's sick, but I can't really do anything for him, and how come you can go to this dinner with the new guy? Like, why can't I go? Anne volunteers that she will take care of the kid. Mary tells her husband she's going. The husband kind of gives her a hard time, which good for him for like standing up to her a little bit. But they end up going to this dinner together. They come back and tell Anne what a great time it was, and Anne's like very mopey about it, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. For some reason I thought this book was going to be different. I don't know, like I thought the writing of this book would be a little bit different. I thought we would get more in the way of backstory, but I think I'm just so used to modern romance that I wasn't really expecting the way that the story is laid out, unfortunately. And like the throwaway like paragraph where we get to hear the history of Anne and Wentworth, like it just wasn't enough for me. Like, how am I supposed to be invested in this like second chance romance if I'm only gonna get a paragraph on like she was agreeable and she really liked him? Okay, like that does not a romance make. Maybe I'll meet Wentworth though and just be completely head over heels, or maybe I'll find out over the course of reading these 3 Jane Austen books that like she can't write a romance to save her life and like I don't like any of these men. Probably not, but you know. I'm gonna continue reading, and hopefully next time I update you, I'm gonna tell you all about Mr. Wentworth. Okay, so I am 50-ish, 60-ish% into Persuasion, and I feel like I'm finally starting to understand Wentworth and Anne and kind of their relationship. This is definitely a miscommunication trope story, shall we say, although I don't think that's how Jane Austen would have like categorized her story. But essentially, Wentworth kind of gets into the social circle that Anne is in when she is visiting her sister Mary. The Musgroves have, I think, 2 daughters. The Musgroves, I believe, are the parents of Mary's husband, could be wrong. Anyway, there are 2 girls, Louisa and Henrietta or something like that, and Louisa has taken a shine to Wentworth and Wentworth likes her as well, and we see some of their interactions. Obviously Anne is like kind of upset by the fact that he has found someone, but she doesn't show it outwardly. She's very much like, oh, I'm so glad that they have like found each other, but she does overhear Wentworth talking to Louisa about how he is looking for a partner that is very self-assured and doesn't make any like wish-washy decisions. And Louisa basically tells him that Anne was proposed to by someone after she was proposed to by him, and that she also turned that person down, and the implication there is that like she also was influenced by Mrs. Russell and her father like not to marry this guy, when in fact Anne has grown from the circumstances of her relationship, or like short courtship I guess you could say, with Wentworth when she gets proposed to that second time. She knows that it's not a good fit, she doesn't want to marry this guy, and she takes it upon herself to not marry him, even though her family is encouraging her to marry the guy. The guy happens to be Mary's husband, like before obviously Mary gets married to him. It's interesting like the miscommunication there, that he really thinks that she hasn't learned anything from their courtship and their like failed, I guess, engagement. It's interesting. I feel like that has been the most interesting and poignant moment for me so far. Everything else I will say I'm like not loving, but I do think Wentworth's character is interesting. He definitely knows at this point that he wants to get married. He is definitely feeling, I'd say, still kind of burnt from the relationship he had with Anne. He's looking for something like what he had with Anne in his description to Louisa and to other people. So yeah, that's interesting. And then we also have Anne, who is kind of trying to move on from everything as well. She meets a couple of men who she develops like not really an attraction, like a full attraction to, but guys that she could potentially see herself getting married to. But then this guy who she thought was going to express interest in her ends up getting engaged to Louisa, who is the person that Wentworth was going to be engaged to. So she's like kind of happy that they're not getting engaged because Wentworth is now free. And then there's obviously some like other family stuff that goes on in the background. And since we care more about the boyfriend aspect of it, the book boyfriend aspect of it, I don't care so much about telling you that stuff, but I will mention that Anne's family is the worst. Her dad and her older sister Elizabeth are so annoying. The fact that they like treat their family that is like higher in rank than them as if they're like royalty, rather than hanging out with people who actually have good reputations, is very interesting. It only shows the contrast between Anne and her family and how they care more about like image, and she cares more about like actually helping people because she has someone who comes back into her life that like has fallen on hard times. And anyway, yeah, Anne definitely has a good character. She's definitely a lot more like staid and stoic. And I think I have seen in other adaptations, I would say, of Jane Austen stuff. She definitely is a different kind of heroine. I don't know that I totally like love her. I do wish she stood up for herself just a little bit more. But it is nice to see that she does have standards for herself and that she is someone who learns from her mistakes, again, especially with not getting to like marry the guy that she loves. So I'll be interested to see kind of how that plays out as the story carries on. I'll probably just update you when I'm finished with this one because I need to shower and I'm running a little bit behind on this video. You find me in conflict, not only with my hair, but also with my feelings on Persuasion. Now, I know that this is not like her most beloved work, but I do know that this has one of the best love declarations of all of Jane Austen's work, and not gonna lie, that letter that our man Wentworth writes to Anne, it did something to me. It set my heart aflutter. But is that enough to excuse his behavior, and or is he really as charming as everyone seems to think that he is? I don't know. I don't feel like I feel that way. I think the issue with this book is that there's not a lot of communication on the part of hero and heroine, and like, I know this is not a traditional romance. This is a ye olden days romance, and it also is social commentary on the time or some shit. I don't know. I feel like a lot of people say Jane Austen has a ton of literary merit. I just feel like Wentworth was okay. Was the declaration great? Sure. Is he a duke? No. So let's try to build a scale here on which to judge him. The scale is going to be words. So basically like how good he is at speech, because that's obviously a big component of Jane Austen's novels, is like the declarations that these guys give the women. So words, overall sexiness factor, and then my rating, like just overall my impression. Would I want them as a book boyfriend or a boyfriend in real life, shall we say? Okay, words. I have to give him a 5 out of 5 on that. Like he did a speech, you know, he did a speech in a letter, and it was good. I can't lie. I can't deny it. If according to science and the internet, this is the best of Jane Austen's like declarations, man declarations, then sure. I think I'm gonna have to rate it a 5 out of 5 if it doesn't get better than this. Like that, it was fantastic. Okay, I will give him that. Of sexiness, I don't know. I wasn't like blown away by him. He's described as this like smart and ambitious man, and I thought he was okay. I think I'll give him like a 3 out of 5 on that, right? Like he wasn't horrible, but is he my kind of man? He did make a name for himself, right? He came from nothing kind of, and gathered a sizable fortune. I'm still leaving him at a 3. And then overall rating in terms of my feelings and thoughts about this man, I think I'm gonna give him a 3.5 out of 5. Yeah, he's a good guy, right? He's a good guy. I wouldn't be upset if he were a life partner. I know he could hold it down financially for me. Would I be overjoyed at his company? Perhaps not. He didn't really do anything special for me. No, he doesn't have to be perfect. We have many more book boyfriends to choose from, hopefully, if I decide to do this again. If not, there's only 2 more we get to choose from. The delightful Mr. Knightley, and then whoever the love interests are in Sense and Sensibility, because frankly, I don't know anything about those books. So I'm gonna go do my hair. I'll be back. I'm gonna get further into Emma. I'm only like 20% in at this point, and I feel like I don't really have like a good feeling to give you. Not that I don't like the book. Emma is the one that I'm most excited about because I love the 2020 adaptation with Anya Taylor-Joy and Johnny Flynn. I'm sorry, but Johnny Flynn, mayhaps, I'm picturing him when I read this book, and he is influencing me. I'm influenced, so let you know my thoughts and feelings at that 50% mark. So I'm 50% into Emma, and I will admit, I watched the 2020 version with Johnny Flynn for like the 3rd, 4th, 5th time or something like that last night. I really adore that adaptation. I didn't know if it was like a true adaptation, it was going to be the most loyal to the book, and that's kind of why I wanted to rewatch it. I was like, I'm gonna do a rewatch, I'm gonna read the book afterwards, and then I'll be able to like compare. And frankly, it is a pretty true adaptation, a pretty fair adaptation. And I think what I'm discovering about Jane Austen and her works, there's a lot of similarities between books, and I don't want to say that having only gotten like into 2 of her books. I feel like she does rely on some familiar archetypes, and or it seems like she's drawing from familiar experiences for herself, so it makes sense as to why things are the way that they are. I'm noticing parallels, I guess, between the like father-daughter relationship here. It's not necessarily like the same. I think Emma really likes her father compared to Anne and her father, but there's definitely some deferential treatment there, and I also think like that's obviously a relationship type that's important to Jane Austen as an author, because I think that's something that's present in a lot of books. Also the relationship between girl Elizabeth in Pride and Prejudice, like I know that her relationship with her father is one that is important to her, and I can't say that I dislike it because I have a great relationship with my father. You know, if I were to write a book, I think I would probably include a nice father-daughter relationship in there too. But it is interesting the way that there are parallels. Like, yeah, I guess she's trying to like make them a little bit different because the fathers are very different, but they do have, you know, relationships with their daughters, and, you know, it's a thing in these books. I've also noticed, yeah, just similarities in terms of all of like the townspeople, I guess you could say. Like there's always going to be a whole host of characters and townspeople, and I think honestly it is just kind of reminding me how different our world is today. Obviously in, you know, the modernity of our world compared to the world that Jane Austen is writing in, but I think for me the bigger thing is like if I were to write a story about my life life today, I would not have half the amount of side characters that Jane Austen has in her novels. And these characters in her books, like half of them are not family members of like the hero or heroine. People were just more interconnected back in the day. And so I'm trying to like put on my lens of like ye olden days while I read these books. But I will say I'm kind of like struggling with this one a little bit, probably because I was struggling a little bit with Persuasion in how much time and attention is spent with these, I guess, side characters. I understand that they are included in these books to be like foils to our main characters or to provide moral lessons to our characters, but I will say it does get a little bit old when all I really want is interactions between the hero and heroine. What can I say? Like, I'm reading this from a romance perspective and I'm just like, I want y'all to talk more. That being said, I am liking Emma quite a bit more than I liked Persuasion, and I think that's no surprise given the amount of time that Knightley and Emma spend together. I kind of like don't want to even rehash the plotline of this book because I genuinely think you would be fine just watching the movie. Like, I really fully feel that way. But this book is about our main character, Emma Woodhouse, and she is a very wealthy woman. She lives with her father, and she doesn't have any intention of marrying. She's like 20 years old, I believe, at the start of the story. She has a few friends, but her governess, who she was really close to, ends up getting married at the beginning of the book, and now Emma is kind of left a little bit directionless. She's not really sure what she wants to do, and her intention is, at the beginning of the book, to marry someone off to Mr. Elton, because she feels like she did a great job matchmaking between, I believe, Miss Taylor, her governess, the guy that she ends up marrying, Mr. Weston. And Mr. Weston and Miss Taylor like still have quite a bit of a role in the story, but I'm probably not going to talk much about them because frankly I don't care that much. But after, you know, Miss Taylor marries that guy, she's like, okay, I need a friend, and she's like, I need something to do. So she's like, I'm going to marry off our town vicar, essentially, to someone. I'm not sure who. And then she befriends a woman named Harriet, and she decides that Harriet is going to be the wife of Mr. Elton, the town vicar or whatever. He's kind of like cute, but it's pretty obvious to us that he definitely has an agenda. Like, he definitely is not trying to settle down, and it's pretty obvious to most people, especially Mr. Knightley. It's not so obvious to Emma. Emma thinks that like she's too clever for her own good, and like she can figure this situation out, right? Like, she can get Mr. Elton to fall for Harriet, who is someone that's new to town and doesn't have a fortune for herself, and her parentage is kind of unknown at the moment. So like, Emma's trying to get crafty and is like, you know what? She might not have a title. She might not come from a titled gentleman. We're not really sure though, so I'm gonna treat her like she does have a titled gentleman father, and so I'm gonna try to like not sell her off but marry her off to someone who is like high up, you know? She deserves the best because she's my friend. And the reason she likes this girl so much is because she likes Emma, basically. Like, she's not very intelligent, but she is really pretty and she's really nice to Emma, and Emma's like, you know what? I'll take you under my wing. I just like how, I don't want to say transparent Emma is, but I like that Mr. Knightley like immediately sees this. He's like, I've known you forever. I know that like you're better than this. Like, you should stop scheming, girl. Like, use your many talents to your best advantage and stop meddling in people's lives. Like, allow people to live their best life, you know? And at the beginning of the story too, we have Harriet getting proposed to by a guy that she knew for a while, a tenant farmer who is very successful, just not a gentleman. And Emma kind of encourages her not to accept this proposal because she's like, yeah, this guy is just like not good enough for you. And because Harriet wants to stay in Emma's good graces, she does turn down the proposal, which is like, it's not a good thing. Like, she doesn't know her parentage, and Knightley is like, you know what? You don't want people to look too hard on her parentage, right? Like, a guy who is high up in the peerage, like, he's gonna want someone who can be able to prove that they have a father that they claim they have, if that makes sense. So he's like, she should just marry the guy that like shows interest in her, who is of a good enough social standing to where like she's going to have a happy life. And Emma's just like not cool with that. So already we're kind of off to a start, and then so much other stuff kind of unfolds from there. It's just it's interesting seeing again the parallels between this one and Persuasion, and honestly like all the damn books that Jane Austen writes. But I notice especially here the people around Emma kind of like outsmarting her is kind of the same as with Anne in Persuasion. It's not that Anne is a particularly like clever person who is trying to outsmart anyone, but there definitely are like moving parts around the main characters that they don't really have much say in, right? So like Emma, she starts to not fall for but kind of talk to this guy, Frank Churchill, who is the son of Mr. Weston. He is a titled gentleman at this point and like definitely stands to make a ton of money. He's charming, but we don't really understand his intentions, and Mr. Knightley definitely doesn't believe that he has very good intentions and kind of tells Emma this himself, but comes in contact with this guy, and she doesn't necessarily want to marry him, but she's like, oh, I can marry him off to Harriet, and that doesn't work because he wants to marry Miss Jane instead. That's a whole nother thing too. Like, I will say, I think Emma is just like a deeply relatable character. Look at me like going off for over 8 minutes. Oh my god. Okay. I will say, I'm liking this book considerably more. Let me try to sum up my thoughts at this 50% mark because I don't really want to get into all the plot details because clearly that's not what matters here. Liking this book more because I like Emma as a character more. I think that the way that she carries herself and the things that she does are interesting. I think that she's a much more relatable character in a lot of ways than any of Jane Austen's other heroines. I mean, I guess Elizabeth Bennet's probably great too. I haven't read Pride and Prejudice yet, but I like Emma because she's not perfect. She obviously has faults, but she's just trying to have fun. I like that she is kind of steadfast in her belief that she doesn't want to marry, but she's really happy to let other people get married around her and like wants to help people. I also like Knightley as the kind of foil and the moral guide for her. I'm not saying that that's what I look for in a partner, but that is something that I do definitely value. I think that partnerships should help both parties be better than they are, right? And that's something that I personally looked for in a partner. I definitely have someone who makes me a better person, and I like that Knightley looks out for Emma and wants her to be a better person and wants her to use her considerable skills to good use, not like shady use like she's been doing in the book. I also like that there's a lot more dialogue and interaction between Emma and Knightley. I think it makes for a more interesting story for sure. And I think if either of these books, either Persuasion or Emma, had been written in present day, I think I probably would have leaned towards a Persuasion-like story because I do like a lost love, I do like big declarations, a mutual pining situation. You'll know how I feel about that. But I just feel like given the way that that story was written, mutual pining didn't really shine. And in this story, while there isn't really a mutual pining situation going on, it's just very clear to me that these two are very well suited for each other. And I just like Knightley. You know, I'm gonna be honest with you. I like a guy that's got like good morals. I don't know. I'm into him. I'm gonna go ahead and finish this book and I will let you know my final thoughts and feelings, but let me just tell you right now, I'm pretty sure he's gonna beat Captain Wentworth, and I don't think that's like a close competition at all. See my besties behind me? Okay. I have been speed reading Miss Jane Austen, and is it a good idea? Probably not, but I did finish Emma and I'm like 50% into Sense and Sensibility. That one I know absolutely nothing about, or knew absolutely nothing about until I started reading it, but let's talk about Emma. I feel like I kind of honestly said everything I needed to say in that last clip because I did actually talk past the 50% mark about that book because, again, I had like watched the movie yesterday. But I will say the book, I mean, it's, I don't want to say nearly identical, but like nearly identical to the movie. And I just think you should watch the movie, I think is really the answer. Because while I don't think Jane Austen is completely inaccessible as an author, I do think that her stories come to life on the screen much better than they can on the page because you relate to them more when you get to see them and see how this like ye olden days speech, I guess, comes to life. So just watch Mr. Johnny Flynn as Mr. Knightley because I think it will really do things to you if you have not already seen it. But I like Mr. Knightley. I really like how Emma comes to realize that she loves him because of all of the things that he has kind of done for her. The ending of the book is a little interesting though. Like I feel like it wraps up like maybe a touch too quickly for my taste because Emma is kind of like in a weird place when Harriet is like, you know, I think I want to marry Mr. Knightley. I think he loves me. And then she goes see Mr. Knightley and she thinks that he likes her too. And that's not the case. He actually likes Emma instead. And she's like, oh, I love you too. Bye. And then Harriet marries Mr. Merton. He's just a charming guy. And I think the way, like his speech, okay, here, let's break it down, right? Let's break it down into the words, the sexiness, and if I would want him as my man. The words that he says to Emma, I think are really sweet, where he's basically like, if I loved you any less, talk about it more, or something like that. Iconic line. And again, Johnny Flynn's delivery of it, beautiful. But I don't think his words are quite as like heart-wrenchingly beautiful as Mr. Wentworth's in the last book, Captain Wentworth, whatever. So I think for words, I'm gonna have to give him a 3. Like his words are fine, like they were good. I think that he kind of makes up for the way that he treats Emma. I think like maybe he could have done a little bit more, frankly, because he was a little bit mean to her at some points, especially with the whole like Miss Bates situation, which is where Emma and her callousness or her ego kind of comes into the spotlight. Like we actually get to see her get called out for the things that she's done. Words for Mr. Knightley, I'm gonna give him a 3. Sexiness factor, I'm gonna give him a 4. I think that he is sexy. I did like him. I think that like the scolding is kind of what's keeping him from being a 5. Like, yes, I'm glad that he tells Emma like, hey, you need to get your life together a little bit, but I do wish that he had been maybe a little nicer at times. And then scale of like 1 to 5, would I want him to be my boyfriend? I don't know, because I haven't read all of Jane Austen's works at this point. I'm gonna give him a 4.5, but that is subject to change. I think if he is my favorite amongst the men, like if I end up liking him more than Mr. Darcy, which you know what, I kind of think is the case, I might bump him to a 5, but at this point, I think he's a 4.5. So I think we're in an upward upward trajectory, though I think that's going to kind of come down a little bit because I'm not as into the love interests in Sense and Sensibility. So this book is about Marianne and Eleanor. Eleanor definitely has like a more staid personality, and Marianne is a little bit more boisterous, and their life circumstances are definitely different than the heroines in the first two books. They are the daughters of a guy who ends up kind of like abandoning them a little bit. They're the daughters of the second wife of this like fancy guy, and when said fancy guy dies, he ends up leaving his estate to his eldest son from his first marriage, and his current wife and his daughters, like, they don't get anything. So they're in kind of weird financial straits, and they know that they're going to like have to marry if they want to live good lives, and they go about this in very different ways. So after they have to like leave their childhood home after like the death of their father, Eleanor is kind of upset because she's not going to get to be by her like guy that she wants to marry, Mr. Edward Ferrars. But Marianne is kind of looking at this as an opportunity to expand her social circle and potentially find a man for herself, and she finds a man in John Willoughby, who is kind of a guy that we don't initially trust, and he is giving, God, I can't remember the guy's name, he is giving like similar vibes to the guy in Pride and Prejudice who like captures the attention of Elizabeth, but he ends up turning out to be a bad guy. Literally, I don't want to say identical situations, but I am noticing so many parallels between Jane Austen's work, and I don't know if I like it or not. Like I was saying, I think maybe in the last clip, like, I feel like she could do a little bit more to sort of like separate her works a little bit, and maybe it's just like this is what was expected of the time, people like familiar formulas, I'm not really sure, but I feel like the circumstances of this book feel similar to her other stuff. It doesn't feel like a real departure, except for I guess maybe the life circumstances of the heroines. Like other than that, everything feels really similar. I'm like midway into volume 2 of the novel, and at this point we know that even though Eleanor really has held a flame, or like a tundra, shall we say, for Edward, he's engaged to another woman, which is scandalous, and she is like obviously really, really torn up about this. And then we have Marianne, who ends up getting abandoned by Willoughby. Like there was rumors, I guess, of their engagement, and Marianne's like, oh, I haven't like told anyone that we're engaged, like who's telling you this rumor? And then when she goes and talks to Willoughby, he's like, what? Like, I don't, we're not getting married. Like, I don't love you. I have really no feelings for you. And Marianne's left kind of devastated. And we get to kind of see, I guess, parallels and like the differences between the two women. Like, obviously they've been slighted by guys that they really care about, but the way they go about getting those guys in the first place is very different, and the way that they handle the situations is very different. Again, Eleanor is very like reserved, and Marianne is definitely like, she's kind of giving Lydia Bennet, like, I'm not gonna lie. And yeah, I don't know which of the sisters I like more, and if it really matters at the end of the day. I just feel like, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is Jane Austen's first published work, and I feel like the characterization of both of the women just feels a little bit too, what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't feel as nuanced, I guess, as something like Emma. I don't really feel like either of these women have like a lot of complexity to their character. It is like she was trying to say, here's one woman and she's one way, and here's another woman and she's a different way, and like you both end up getting screwed over. It doesn't really matter what your personality is. I don't know if that's like the takeaway that she wants us to take from this story. I haven't finished the book yet, but that's kind of like what I'm getting from this, and I don't know. In terms of love interests, it's hard to say like who's gonna end up with who. There's also this guy named like Colonel Brandon, I want to say. He's fine. Like, I think he's the nice guy. I don't know if like, he's going to turn out to be a love interest. I feel like what's going to happen, because this happens in like a lot of the books for Miss Jane Austen, I do think that Edward and Eleanor are going to end up getting married. I think he's going to like break off his engagement with whoever he is with. I think he's engaged to Lucy or something like that, a character that we meet who's like not that relevant, to be honest. We have a lot of throwaway female characters in these books. That's just how it is. But I feel like, I don't know, kind of neutral. I mean, Edward's kind of the worst because, like, he didn't tell Eleanor that he was engaged while he was, like, talking to her. It's pretty uncool if you ask me, so I'm not sure that I love him. And then, I really don't know who Marianne's love interest is going to be. I feel like the only contender at this point is Colonel Brandon, but, like, I don't know if they're a great match, so I don't know. I don't know about these guys, frankly. I don't know if these are, like, the best of the best, but I'm going to finish this book, and I'm going to let you know my final thoughts and feelings. Obviously, the clips have been longer, but I have been telling you about like bigger chunks of the book. That's because I didn't realize how long the first part of this video was, and I'm sorry that you've had to sit through all of this, but hopefully these like more compact thoughts and feelings are like giving you enough. Hopefully you're understanding my thoughts and feelings. To be honest, I don't know if Jane Austen is for me, and I'm not sure if I will do another version of this video, but I am determined to find a book boyfriend, you know? one to reign supreme, at least in this video. We'll pick one at the end. All right, I'll be back. What a book to end the video off on. I didn't enjoy Sense and Sensibility. I'm gonna be honest with you. I feel like this is the weakest of the books that I've read by Miss Jane Austen because I feel like the characters lack any real finesse, any real nuance. I do think I did this book a bit of a disservice reading it after Emma, which I think has some of Jane Austen's most interesting characters, but I just didn't really care about the outcome of the story. I didn't really care for either of the eventual love interests. I was kind of onto something with the Marianne Colonel Brandon thing, but I just feel like, honestly, it did seem sort of like a throwaway marriage in a sense. Like, Colonel Brandon's a good guy, sure, but I don't think that he is necessarily like the right person for Marianne. Like, there's a difference between an Emma and Knightley situation where they complement each other. I feel like in this situation, it's just like, oh, well, Marianne's already been turned down by the one guy that, like, she was really into, so I guess we're gonna put her with, like, a safe bet. It just didn't seem that fun to me, and, like, I think at his core, Colonel Brandon's an interesting guy, or not interesting, but a nice guy. I just don't think that, like, he's for me personally. I do want to see the adaptation of this one because I think Alan Rickman plays Colonel Brandon, and to me, I think he could maybe win me over. I think he could like add life to a character who I just don't care about. Edward too, like, wet blanket. Like, they're both just so not really my kind of hero. No, I was gonna say, I guess I can appreciate the fact that, like, he held up his engagement to Lucy because he felt like, you know, he needed to, but also, like, follow your heart, my guy. Your personality's kind of bland, so the very least you could do is, like, make yourself stand out by, you know, getting out of that as quickly as possible. Let's put them on the scale. Okay. Words for Colonel Brandon. I'm gonna give him like a 1, to be honest, because I don't think he really did anything remarkable, nothing that I was really into. Okay, no, I'm gonna give him a 1.5 because at least he did a little bit more than Edward, right? Like, he didn't have a fiance, so we'll give him that. Sexiness factor, he's like a middle-aged man who's apparently like, so I'm gonna give him like a 2 on the sexiness scale. Would I get with scale? I'm also gonna put him at a 2, right? Because he's not Knightley, right? Like, he's just not Knightley. And then let's do Edward. I'm going to give him a 1 on the words scale. No, I'm sorry, nothing could make up for the fact that you were engaged to someone. Like, that just is not for me. On the sexiness scale, he's also described as not being very sexy. He's not middle-aged. I'm going to give him a 2 on this again. And then in terms of would I get with, I'm going to give him a 1. I'm sorry, he's just like probably my least favorite of the guys. You know, Colonel Brandon, like, he's not for me, but like, I think he's a good guy at least. Edward can't really say the same, so yikes. I think if I were to rate this book, I'd probably give it like 2 stars, frankly, and it feels weird rating Jane Austen stuff because it is so old and it seems weird to hold it to the same standards that I hold old romance to, but a lot of people love her stuff and a lot of people think she's like fantastic at writing, and I think what I've discovered from this video is that beauty is in the eye of the damn beholder, you know? I am a modern gal. I like modern romance, and I frankly just don't think that Jane Austen's characters, at least in the books that I've read, have been complex enough to really hold my attention, and I don't really like all of the side characters. I know people are charmed by them and think they're fun and, you know, create interesting conflicts, but I just don't care that much. I like my romances to be centered on the hero and heroine, and that's just not the case here, and this is just how romances and courtships played out back in the day, but like, I don't know, I just don't think her stuff is necessarily for me. Definitely my favorite book of the 3 was Emma. I really, really like Emma, and I just don't know if I want to read any of the other books, because I'm like, are any of them going to hold up as well? I might read Pride and Prejudice. I feel like I need to at least read Pride and Prejudice to really like round out my feelings, but I don't think I'm going to read her other works. I just don't think that's really for me. Now, I am glad that I think I found a book boyfriend. I really think that Mr. Knightley come home with me. You know what I mean? Like, I think if it doesn't work out with Hayden, like, Mr. Knightley is for me, but my Jane Austen experiment, I think, might be ending here. I was going to do this like a 2-part series thing. No. Sorry, Jane. Sorry, my girl. Simply not for me. I need some smut. I need a delightful happily ever after. I want women who don't have to settle. And that is the beauty of modern day, right? We don't have to settle for boring books or boring men. Thanks so much for watching. Love you all so much. And until next time.